Hello and welcome once again to the Word of the Day podcast, coming to you, as always, pre-recorded from the RAV4 studios. My name is Jamie Silva, and would you believe it is once again time to pleasantly explain another useful word to you all. And here to help me do so, please welcome to the program today's talented voice actor, Annalisa. Annalisa, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Okay, let's get right into today's word, which is perturbing. This is an adjective, and it's similar in both pronunciation and meaning to the word disturbing. But it's definitely different, and I think in important ways, especially as regards how the two words relate to people's emotional states. So, in my view, in addition to a couple other more boring meanings that we won't talk about in this episode, disturbing means something like deeply unsettling or psychically jarring. Whereas, on the other hand, perturbing better describes things that merely leave you kind of apprehensive or bothered, or maybe even a little weirded out. In short, a little perturbed.
You'll notice the meaning of perturbing is milder, as if it's a toned-down version of disturbing. A good way to think about the difference is that if you're perturbed by something, you might raise an eyebrow at it or cock your head to the side and squint at it.
By way of example, if we were recording like we are now, and we heard a knock at the door of the RAV4 studios, that would definitely be unexpected. It would be rather concerning, and I might adopt a perturbed expression, kind of like the one Annalisa just described. Like, I'm not freaking out about this, but I'm definitely somewhat uncertain and ill at ease.
On the other hand, if you were disturbed, you'd probably furrow your brow, bug out your eyes, and stare straight ahead.
Or maybe dart your eyes from side to side with your mouth slightly open as you contemplate whatever disturbing reality confronts you.
This reaction of being disturbed would be more appropriate if we discovered evidence that someone was coming into the RAV4 studios at night and recording their own language podcast on our equipment without our permission. Maybe this evidence would take the form of like an unfamiliar microphone cable or a copy of the Oxford English Dictionary mistakenly left behind. That would be kind of creepy, right? Perhaps a bit scary. And I might say, wow, the fact that someone would break in here without us knowing and record their own show, that's pretty disturbing. Like, I almost don't feel safe in here anymore.
I get chills just thinking about it.
Well, thankfully, this is all hypothetical, because the RAV4 studios are very secure. And producer Pete assures me he always locks up after we're done recording.
I'm glad to hear it. Okay, let's now compare your definitions for perturbing and disturbing to the online editions and see how they differ. First, perturb. Oh, and what you're about to hear is simply the verb form of perturbing.
Right, and just to tie all these forms together, if something perturbs you, it is perturbing, and you are perturbed.
Exactly. So the official definition of perturb goes like this, quote, to make someone anxious or unsettled, unquote. And conversely, the online definition of disturb, or at least the sense of it we're focusing on here, goes to destroy the tranquility or composure of.
Although this definition of disturb doesn't set up as sharp a contrast with perturbed as I would like, it's still pretty close, and especially if you focus on the word destroy. Think about what it feels like to have your sense of tranquility get completely obliterated. That's the idea here. Here's a good way to think about the distinction. If you're familiar with the famous children's story of Madeline by the author Ludwig Bebelmans, Madeline and 11 other little French girls, seemingly orphans, are under the care of one Miss Clavel, who looks to be some sort of nun.
Well, actually, Jamie, and this is a bit of a tangent, but according to Ludwig Bebelmans' grandson, popular theories of orphans and nuns and such are simply ridiculous. And actually, according to an early draft of a Madeline manuscript this grandson has in his possession, the 12 little girls aren't orphans at all, but are simply at a boarding school in Paris, presumably sent there by their very much alive parents. Second, Miss Clavel is a nurse, not a nun. And get this, Madeline is from Texas.
Wow, what a surprise. I had no idea.
I know, right? So, Jamie, how would you describe your feelings right now? Are you kind of disturbed by this news, or?
No, not disturbed, just a little perturbed, that's all. It was so unexpected, you see, and kind of makes me wonder what other beloved children's stories I've misunderstood all my life. Anyway, to get back to the main thread here, obviously Madeline is constantly engaging in various hijinks, and there is a recurring scene in the animated cartoon version of Madeline where Miss Clavel wakes up in the middle of the night, turns on her night lamp by her bed, and declares something is not right, something is quite wrong. And then she sings a whole song about it, which goes like this.
Something is not right. Something is quite wrong. Something is not right. And so I sing this song
You can really sense Miss Clavel's urgency there, and I think the two key phrases she uses, something is not right and something is quite wrong, these perfectly capture the distinction between perturbing and disturbing. If you're perturbed, you're like, something's not right. I'm not totally on board with whatever's going on. I'm perhaps even a little troubled or apprehensive. But if you're disturbed, then you're like, wow, something is quite wrong. Something extra strange or bad is happening, and I'm super anxious about it.
Here's another example from Star Wars. You're likely familiar with this ominous statement from Darth Vader.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
And meanwhile, as he says this, with a simple pinching gesture, Darth Vader nearly chokes out the guy who lacks faith in the power of the Force. It's iconic.
Now, if Darth Vader had instead said, I find your lack of faith perturbing, that wouldn't be nearly so ominous, right? And in that case, maybe he would have just used the Force to, lightly punch the guy in the arm. Again, not so serious.
Agreed. Now, in terms of usage, I think we've mapped this out pretty well already. Use perturbing essentially when you want a less intense form of disturbing. This is a little inexact, but it's basically accurate and easy to remember.
There are lots of situations where perturbing comes in handy, especially those where you need to be subtle or diplomatic. Like at work, for example. It would be way too blunt, too harsh, I think, to call someone's poor progress on an important project disturbing. However, referring to it as perturbingly incomplete, I'm afraid, I think conveys just the right mix of restraint and urgency that would motivate a well-intentioned slacker to step up their game without cowing or panicking them.
Of course, maybe you want them to be panicked, in which case maybe do go with disturbing instead. I guess consult your favorite book on management techniques for more guidance here. All right, it's now time to get some examples of how to use perturbing or perturbed in ordinary conversation or writing. Example number 1. John was perturbed to see so many guests on his back patio, since he knew, and couldn't keep secret for much longer, the fact that he hadn't stocked enough IPAs for the whole gang.
Example number 2. As he got in his car to head to the football game, Barry checked the traffic on his GPS. The deep shade of red on his intended route was perturbing, but he was pretty sure he could find some shortcuts.
Example number 3 comes to us from the book Night and Day by Virginia Woolf. Quote, the Hilburys subscribed to a library which delivered books on Tuesdays and Fridays, and Catherine did her best to interest her parents in the works of living and highly respectable authors. But Mrs. Hilbury was perturbed by the very look of the light, gold-wreathed volumes, and would make little faces as if she tasted something bitter as the reading went on. Unquote. Incidentally, if anyone listening in the Silicon Valley area heard this and, like me, thought, wow, a subscription box for books. What a brilliant idea. I should start one of those. Subscription boxes are already so hot these days. Well, I'm sorry to say there seem to be literally dozens of BookBox subscription services out there already, as evidenced by this listicle I found entitled 27 Book Subscription Boxes You'll Absolutely Want to Sign Up For.
That's a lot of books. Do I have to sign up for them all at once?
I don't know about have to, but as it says here, you'll absolutely want to.
Well, we'll see about that. Back to the examples here. The fourth comes from a Jeeves and Wooster story by P.G. Wodehouse. Quote, I don't mind admitting that I was a bit perturbed. There were furrows in the old brow, and I had a kind of foreboding feeling. As long as this chump stayed in New York, I was responsible for him, and he didn't give me the impression of being the species of fellow a reasonable chappie would care to be responsible for more than about 3 minutes. Unquote.
Okay, folks, that'll do it for the examples, as well as today's show. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and thank you, Annalisa, for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
All right, everyone, this is Jamie Silva on behalf of everyone here at the Word of the Day podcast, saying so long from the RAV4 studios. We very much hope you enjoyed this episode. Honestly, we might be a little perturbed if you didn't, and we'll see you next time.